Hello, Iowa.
Hello.
Hi. Well, it's good to be here. This is an interesting new feature. I think I'll be using it quite a bit. So thank you, Holly Hart, for educating me on this matter. My name is Kent Mesplay. I'm one of the Green Party presidential candidates. And really, the problem as far as the status quo goes is that a lot of green solutions make good sense, but here's the issue. We live in a society that's based strongly upon consumption, upon buying things that are made to be obsolete and that break and that wear out by design. And when you talk about demand reduction to someone who's into selling stuff, that's a threat. So when we talk about radical simplicity, about not living outside our means, about looking at our ecological footprint and realizing that our Western way of life can't continue because we don't have a standby planet, that's a threat to people who really don't want to change. Well, the solution is what we need to do. We need to do it right away. We need to do it in upcoming months. We need to not wait to have a green president or a green Congress. What we need to do is relocalize and get these solutions from the ground level up. So in addition to growing more of our own food and having more local storage and treatment of water, we need to have an alternative economy, what I've been referring to as a hybrid economy, in the same sense that with hybrid vehicles, they're both gas-powered and electric-powered, we can have an economy that still has the labor market, that still has this model of competition, but that has to sit atop a foundation of strong local involvement and control. Years ago, I talked about raising the basic standard level of living, raising the baseline. And we do that by having good governance, but we also do it by realizing that we need to learn to take better care of ourselves. I'm an emergency shelter manager for the county. When we have firestorms or when the earthquake should happen, I would be one of those called to help manage evacuation shelters. I know from what I've seen and from my training and from my understanding of our way of life that we're really not prepared for much of anything. We had a major power failure here in September, and so refrigerators were off for about 9 or 10 hours. And it was great. It was a social event, and then people lit candles, they went outside, they got to know their neighbors. But we didn't know when it happened how long the power would be out, so a lot of food spoiled. People didn't know, for example, that with a lot of freezers, if you keep the door shut on the freezer, the food will be good for about 2 days, depending on, you know, the model of the fridge and how much you have in there. So had that power failure lasted a full day or 2 days, there really would have been chaos. People were stranded at gas stations. They couldn't pump gas because the gas, the motors that pump the gas run on electricity. Years ago, I referred to these as umbilical cords that our society has, and we need to learn to cut those, to get off the grid whenever we can, to design our communities to be as sustainable as possible, so that not just in terms of any power outage, but in terms of perhaps longer lasting emergencies, people will be okay, that we'll get by and there won't be as much suffering. This approach, though, is one that helps us mitigate climate change. If we have, for example, more efficient buildings, then we don't use as much energy and we don't rely so much on importing oil. Also, household and small business bills are lower when we don't have to spend as much on energy. So really the green movement is an independence-enhancing movement, but it tends to be a threat to the powers that be, which is why I like to talk in terms that touch on some of that fear that is so widespread these days. And I use security arguments. One of my slogans has been, sustainability is security. It's the same as security. We have our basic physical security enhanced when we live sustainably. So I'm talking about having more local access to food and water. Also, we can have a society in which no one is homeless. We need government help, or rather the government not to get in the way in that regard. We need to grow more of our own medicinal plants. We need to be more supportive of alternative medical models as well. There's a lot that can be done, but our political system is basically part of the problem. And it is part of the problem because of the corrupting influence of money, which is another thing that we Greens are working on, trying to get the money out of politics, because it corrupts, it influences that decision making. So even while we're working within the political system, building the party, we are trying to change that very system, and there are challenges associated with that. I think it's a really good time to be a Green. I'm thankful to the Stein campaign for all the work that she and her teams have done in getting the Green Party on more ballots. This puts us perhaps a little past just life support mode. And I'm also thankful for Roseanne Barr jumping in, because she has brought us some attention. And I've said from the start, when I knew that she was becoming involved, that we Greens need to have a little more fun with this, because we tend to be deathly serious, and Roseanne needs to be a little more serious, because we all know what a great comedian she is. I think the challenge right now will be to get out the Green vote. Here in California, we vote in less than 2 weeks. It's too late to register to vote. But in part, since we already have our nominee apparent, and because there's so much disinterest in the presidential race, it's going to be difficult to get those Green votes. So nationwide, if you're listening to this and you have registered with the Green Party, please get out there and vote. We really need your votes, because we either use it or we lose it. And we Greens expend a lot of money and effort on just obtaining and maintaining ballot status. So if you are a registered Green, please be sure that you vote if you can still vote in the primaries. And that's especially for California. Texas is coming up as well. But also in the general election. I think this will be a good year for the Green Party. But I'm aware, perhaps more than most, of what those challenges are. I haven't yet been able to run full-time for office. I've done what I can by using Google Hangout now for the first time, and by Skyping in. I didn't even have a chance to grab a glass of water after my my last interview. But I'm thankful that you're having me on. So thank you to Holly, and thank you, Iowa Green Party. If I glossed over something, or if you have some questions, now might be a good time to answer perhaps 2 or 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. I'll just start to butt in like this, but I'll just mention the way this Google Hangout works is that whoever is speaking, those of you here are maybe familiar with the ICN. Whoever is speaking gets the large picture, and so if Kent starts talking again, he'll be on the large picture, on the large pane. I do want to thank a few people just before we offer some questions to Kent. Craig Seeman in New York City is kind of the engineer behind this, and Starlene Rankin in Sacramento is also one of the other production engineers. She's formerly or originally from Ames, one of ours. So Craig and Starlene, thank you. And also Bond Drager, who is the Iowa City Public Library tech person who got this set up. She was really excellent information resource. So anyway, if any of you have a question for Kent, now would be the time to ask it. You might say your name first, and if you have an office or interest or whatever. So here's the first one.
Great. Hi. Yes.
Hi. Hi, I'm Wendy Barth, and I was a Green Party candidate for governor a few years ago.
Excellent.
I'm currently the co-chair here. And what I'd like you to elaborate on a bit is how you see the federal government actually helping to enact some of your visions. If you were actually elected, what would you do with that mechanism of the federal government to fulfill some of the excellent ideas that you have laid out here?
Okay, thank you. I'll try to do that in 10 seconds or less. Really, what we have now is a highly closed society with a lot of tools available to the executive branch. It's done in the name of national security, homeland security, fatherland security, whatever you want to call it. These are fear-mongering tactics that that highly controlling and dictatorial regimes use. I was watching a program hosted by Naomi Wolf last night that spelled out what a truly closed society we currently have. And so kind of painting this with a broad brush, what I would do is I would use those powers to declare a state of emergency, because we are in a state of emergency. Those who've lost their homes and are living on the street are in a state of emergency. People who have lost their jobs, and I see that every day on the job as an air quality inspector. I inspect a lot of small businesses, and I know how they're just barely holding on. So by declaring a state of emergency, I think what we can do is enact some changes very quickly. One would be to grow food wherever we can, because that's a priority. If someone's not able to eat, then their health goes down. Everything goes downhill from there. So water and food are really top priorities. What that means is we need more agreement across government levels, from the local level to the state level to the national level, that, for example, we ought to be growing more food in public parks, getting rid of some of the lawn space and having community gardens. There are a lot of good common sense solutions like that. I take a break in a county park. I use the restroom there. We had rainfall recently, and people huddle under the eaves to try to stay warm. I mean, this is America in 2012, and we have such a homeless problem. It's not a homeless problem. What it is a problem of political will. With energy as well, there are steps that can be taken so that we can have more energy efficiency and that we won't rely so much on foreign oil. That's really a loaded question, and I'd probably ramble on for about half an hour. But basically, by using the tools that are currently available at the federal level and working within the emergency pretext and context, a lot can be done. My messaging I've set up bearing this in mind, that we live in a time in which there's a lot of fear. So I use security arguments. When I say sustainability is security, I mean it. When we have that basic built-in physical security, we're better off. And we do that by living sustainably, by meeting our own needs as locally as possible. But also, of course, by having a federal government that comes in and picks up the slack when we need it, such as through a jobs program. We really need both, but my emphasis has been on relocalization. Thanks for the good question. I'll be pondering a shorter response to that. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Lorelei.
Hi, Lorelei.
You just spoke with my mother.
Oh, okay. And you're in the same room. Good. All right.
Would you please describe your vision for education in the United States?
Our current educational system is based largely on the factory model. We see this with the anesthetic appeal of the box-like structures that are schools. We need to get away from this. This started basically during the time of the Industrial Revolution. I think that what we currently take 12 years to reach can be done in about 10 years. That people can basically be done with high school in about 10 years and then go into either a technical path or into a college path to get, for example, advanced degrees such as I received. I found that my education was inadequate, not so much because of what I was taught, but rather because I wasn't prepared for the real world, in the sense that I was over-specialized. I think it's important for anyone who goes into college to bear in mind that they will likely be working 2 or more jobs during their lifetime, and they need to have, for example, a double major or at least a minor concentration. My minor concentration as an undergrad was art. I come from an artistic musical family, and so I decided to challenge myself, and I went into engineering. But even within engineering, there's a lot of competition, and it depends on what kind of engineering you do. So I was unemployed for a very long time, even with a PhD. Then I got into teaching, then I got into doing what I am now. I believe in homeschooling. My mother taught me the first 3 grades. I grew up in the eastern rainforest of Papua New Guinea, so we received correspondence lessons from Australia. My mom would teach me, and I'd fill out the paperwork, and she'd mail it to Australia. So I'm homeschooled, which really, you know, depending on the parent, is an excellent way to learn. Also, I had friends I played with, so I had that enculturation as well. But people can be a little bit too isolated, depending on just how the homeschooling is done. Out here in California, of course, we have charter schools. I do believe in charter schools, but not at the expense of public schools. And our public schools are teaching the wrong curricula. What we really need to do is also teach people basic life living skills, including, and many would laugh at that, gardening. Well, there's been blowback in some of the communities here where there are programs at the elementary level, because with a strong Hispanic percentage, or Latina percentage, the parents don't want their children to just go into agribusiness. So there's a negative connotation among some elements there. But really, these basic skills that we need, not just in terms of emergencies, but in terms of how we need to transform society and do it as quickly as possible. And online learning, I'm very much an advocate of that as well. So really, I think the Green Party value that ties into this would be diversity. I think we need to have a diverse approach and get the money, the advertising money, out of all school grounds, which is a problem right now with sponsorship coming from corporate America. That has to be stopped. And there are some promising trends reversing that. For example, getting soda machines out of schools, that sort of thing. Thanks, that was a good question. I'll try to shorten that answer as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions for Kim Mesplay? No, one more question. Okay.
Hello again, my name is Ted.
Hi, Ted.
You just heard from Wendy's daughter. She's probably the youngest in this room. I may be the oldest because I'm pushing 80.
You're an elder. Great.
Yeah, so my question would be, how do we expect to engage in the Green Party with people we might call the younger generation? And I mean 18 to 25, maybe up to 30, but no higher. What's your plan, or what would you suggest to engage young people? Because I did some speaking in the local high school in Davenport, Iowa, and they seem to be receptive. But then, of course, now more recently, their curriculum has been set up so it won't allow for someone to come in like this because it was in the social studies department. So I'm just kind of wondering where you are with regard to that question.
I've spoken at a local high school also, at Carlsbad High School, about a decade ago. Repeatedly, I was invited in on a panel which also included representatives of other political parties. The good thing about younger people is that they haven't bought into this, let's call it almost an urban myth regarding Florida and Nader and Gore in 2000. Really, if you look at the numbers, people were brought into the Green Party, were brought into voting by Ralph Nader, and I believe that Gore would have lost by even more had Nader not been in the race. If you look at the many factors involved, overall Nader was actually a plus. But what's happened is with older people, there's this myth really that the Green Party hurts the Democrats' chances, and that even the most reprehensible Democrat is better than the Republican in the race. That kind of thinking I haven't heard so much from younger people. because they didn't encounter that, or they're smart enough to see through it. When I was in Illinois, I hung out with some younger Greens, and I was very impressed. I'm a convert from the other political parties, but there are younger people who have never been registered with anything other than Green. I think by keeping it new, dynamic, by using different modes of communication, such as we're doing now, by using smartphones, by reaching people in a more dynamic manner, we really appeal to younger people who grew up with different technology than we grew up with, and who really don't want to wait. They don't want to wait in line. They don't want to go through some cumbersome process. And we need to make, for example, voting easier for everyone. Same-day registering, for example. Why can't we do this? Don't we have the communication means to, allow people to register closer to the time of voting? Even a day or two ahead would be better than 2 weeks and more. So there are some simple steps like that we can take. I think really messaging, because with our future focus, with our talk about ecological wisdom, we're not doing this just for plants and animals and people today, but for people of tomorrow. So in a sense, the Green Party really does belong more to young people than to those of us who are older. I think the Green Party is more attractive when people actually get to hear what our message is and get to hear what the 10 key values are that we think about and that we discuss. Then they're turned on. They're interested. But the problem is the same problem that I've had with my campaign. It's one of fundraising. It's one of outreach, getting the word out there. And here we just need to be creative. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, what we're doing today is using a Google Hangout. This is the first time I've done that. In the past, I've just used Skype. And when we have this diverse approach, it appeals to more people, but especially younger people who just don't have the patience some of us have, and maybe that's a good thing. Thanks. It's been really good to be here. I don't see any other questions, and you probably have someone else. Jill is maybe ready. Any other questions? If not, I'd encourage you to support me. Mesplay.org is my website. I do have campaign debt that I would like to erase. And also I've been more involved in indigenous communities with Native Americans, which will really be my focus over the upcoming years, doing outreach on tribal land. Thanks again, Holly, for having me here, and Craig and Starlene and others for the communication, and to those of you who are present at the Iowa Green Party meeting. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ken.
Would you mind answering a follow-up question?
No, I don't mind at all, as long as it doesn't interfere with the process. Sure.
Yeah, this may seem like a silly question, so pardon me, but do you think math should be taught in the public schools?
Math? Yeah, that's a great question. The relevance is decreasing. The relevance of math is decreasing. So I would think that it could be taught in different ways. I liked math until I got into college, and then I had a teacher who was not very, very creative. So with our technology, it's possible to make math a little more understandable. I think math is overemphasized. I mean, even as a scientist, I found that 2/3 of the math that I learned, I've never used. And people have calculators these days. I think it's good to approximate, to be able to kind of rough out an answer and know if you're even in the right ballpark. So you know if you punch the wrong keys that you did so. But yeah, I think math is overrated, yeah, I didn't expect that question. It's not so silly. We can look at other subjects as well. I would like languages to be taught more and for there to be more flexibility. For example, with native language speakers who speak Native American languages, I think it's important that they not be required to have the same full credentialing in order to teach in their language, because languages are dying out. I grew up in a land with over 500 different languages. Because of the terrain, entirely separate languages evolved, and many of these are dying out. So I would say language study is even more important than math. I think most Americans ought to be bi or trilingual, and I say that in comparison with mathematics. Is I'd like to see more of the language requirement than a math requirement. That was a good question. I didn't anticipate that, but I have wondered too over the years. It's like, why did I learn all this math? And for those who don't go into technical fields, I think it's overrated. Don't tell any of my scientist friends that, but I think in general. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
One important feature to keep in mind is that these are sovereign nations. Yeah, they're not minority groups. Yeah, these are sovereign nations. So really, the concept of sovereignty, because it's the federal government that really has sway over the reservations. Though in places there are agreements with the sheriff's department, so there is local enforcement action. For example, in cases of domestic abuse, etc. Overall, the approach, and I'm having to remember what I said and when I said it. That's right, that was Florida a little while ago. Overall, my approach is to work to bring together the tribes, and there has been interest in that, with the goal being their common survival. In other words, sharing resources and abilities and knowledge across the different tribal nations to increase not just the basic quality of life, but chances of them surviving the more horrific effects of climate change. So that's where my emphasis is going to be. In a sense, I put the cart before the horse, in that people get into politics when they have a strong backing. For Roseanne, it's been her celebrity status. For Jill, the team that she ran with and the connections that she made within the Green Party. For me, it will be more in the future from native country, from the networks that I've been putting into place. And I largely got into politics to help such people. I believe in solving problems, and from what I see, much of what happens in politics is the problem. One other point to make is that where there are resources extracted from Indian land, the rightful owners of that, natural gas or oil or what have you, often don't even see their fair share of, that was outlaid in the agreements. So there's just ongoing theft. In Arizona, John McCain and others in Congress are trying to steal, there's no other word for it, steal the water rights from the native people. And then there are deeper cultural issues. For example, sacred sites being desecrated. The San Francisco Peaks in Arizona are sacred, and there's artificial snow made with recycled wastewater, which is seen as a deep, deep insult. But basically, it's what we find elsewhere. The darker your skin color, the more you tend to be disrespected, and this is certainly true in Indian country, where where our government really doesn't even treat these people as being real human beings, and they need advocacy as much as other what we would call minority groups do, but they're not minorities. Again, these are sovereign nations. So I think really what I'm thinking of is to almost give up on the federal government. I've almost given up on politics and on Western civilization, and I'd like to focus in the upcoming years on helping tribal people survive. I was just offered a whole bunch of solar panels. There's an upgrade that's happening in a desert not too far from here, and I'm gathering more information. Someone had offered to me basically used solar panels, but I need to figure out if these are basically just toxic waste that they're trying to get rid of on an unwitting party, or if they have some life left. And because it's in the Palm Springs area, I think that perhaps some wealthy people upgraded and they've got extra photovoltaic panels. And so I'd like to donate those to one of the reservations and help us get some basic electricity. So I think more can be done through good than through government channels at this excuse me. That's a good question. I'll see if something else pops in mind. But really at this point I think it's more important that the tribes learn to work with each other. And there are serious obstacles to that. Some are highly matrilineal. Others are there are differences of language. They're not all just Indians, not all just Native Americans. There's extreme diversity even within Indian country. But that's really where my heart is. Thanks for the question.